We're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our second episode of Planting Seeds. It's a little confusing because we recorded number 3 yesterday, but this is live and out today. So, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As you may know, I'm Estefania, aka NFT Mommy, and this is
Amira.
co-founder to Grow with Guava, and we're here today joined by U.pe founder Vanessa, who's going to be talking to us a bit about how she bootstrapped growth locally in Costa Rica and also secretly crypto pilled tons of people to get involved locally while supporting their community through U.pe. So I'm going to bring her on stage and have her introduce herself and tell us a bit more about what she's working on. Welcome. How are you, Van? Great to see you.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having
Great.
me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. Thank you for tuning in and taking the time to be here today. To kick us off, I'd love for you to give us a proper intro to who you are and what is U.pe.
I'm Van. I am one of the founders. There's four of us from U.pe. We are a platform or a digital space that allows locals in IRL communities to syndicate information that's important to them. We're starting mainly with community events, what we have, like the happenings, important contacts on the ground. Here in rural Costa Rica, we don't have a lot of centralized options like Yelp, Nextdoor. And so we find that there is this desperate need to have a place where people can share this, we can qualify it, and we can push it out there. So there's a few moving parts to what we're doing. And so we have different types of people who are engaging on different levels, and the experiments that we've been running have been really fun and eye-opening and rewarding.
That is so cool. First thing I heard was Yelp and other types of platforms that were currently used worldwide as maybe a monopoly or leading type of vendor for local businesses, or I guess middleman for local businesses. And that seems like a super big company to maybe be in competition with or in alignment with. How is it that you've been able to immerse like U.pe into the market in Costa Rica? And those sort of platforms haven't fully come in and taken over.
Well, first and foremost, we're not a directory, thank goodness, because that's really exhausting. Um, and what we have found is that there's just a few people who like to share a lot of the information. There's a lot of people who like to consume information. Places like Yelp are, um, in terms of aggregation, it's really nice to be able, in theory, to have a place to go find all the information in one place. And so we do really appreciate uh, those type of features. And to your point, it's like, how do you go if it gets something big? It's like, well, we actually don't want to do that. And what brought us to Web3 to begin with was this idea of decentralization without even knowing what it was called. So our journey here has been less technical and more about evolving to what people around here need, and then finding the right components. So to your point of, you mentioned earlier, it's like, well, people are being onboarded without even knowing. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We don't actually have to talk about the technology. The technology actually does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Like, it's the best solution for us. So we we love this idea because even where we are, we have three communities that we're working in, and we're all very close geographically, but we all have very different needs. And so that's enough to start an inquiry, to start experimenting, to say, like, well, what else get these larger centralized pieces of technology do? Like, what else are they missing? And so we literally started at the ground floor, started asking friends, family, other business owners, community leaders, what do you want? And it's been a 2-year process of building things, showing it to them, and we've gotten, this is incredibly useful, to go away, I don't want to see this, like, this is taking up too much time. So as a founder, you have to be able to internalize all that and actually do something with that. So we've been growing with the request of what people are, what they've asked for. And there's so much success to be found within that right there.
I love that so much. You said two things that really spoke to me, which was the experiments that you're facilitating throughout so that you're able to then figure out like what's working, what's not working. And two, you're asking people what it is that they want. The reason those things I think are so critical and important, it's like when I put like my marketing hat on or like my growth hat on, I'm thinking like there's so many companies that come into the space and they don't have PMF. There is no actual conversation with a customer. It's just a great idea, and we just want to take it to market. And because there's blockchain on it, like everyone wants it, and like that's far from the truth. So I love to hear that you're actually just making use of the technology because it works. So I'm curious to know, like, was U.pe being built originally like without the idea of blockchain in mind, and it just has so happened that this technology was like the right fit for what you're doing? Or was it inspired because you saw this coordination already happening within the ecosystem and it made sense for you to build something locally because the infrastructure was there?
It's definitely the former. As someone who's been a part of grassroots community and decentralized communities, not knowing what they were, just it's been a way of life my entire life. Um, as soon as I started diving into the technology side of it, and I have a Web 2 background, I just was like, oh my gosh, this is going to solve so many problems. Oh my gosh, the scaling that you can do with this is just absolutely insane. And then finally, when smart contracts came along, I went, oh my gosh, this will change the world.
Mm.
Um, and I think one of the first people who I met was Zaku from Coordinate. And he and I started talking, and he has this HR perspective from it. And coming from a business background, I went, oh, like, where was this? This could have saved me, you know, 40 hours this one year, just one little issue. And I'm like, I could have been so much more productive had this not been around, so much more efficient.
Yeah.
And so that's what's so appealing about it, is that it's, once we get the UX taken care of, the idea of like blockchain and how it all works is just so incredibly efficient for getting so much done. Storing records, having information, sharing information.
Yeah, I that totally makes sense. And how incredible too that you've been able to bring it to a region that's usually underrepresented or underserved. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about like the grassroots effort that helped build the community of Upe as it is today. I myself have been talking to you for the past few months quite regularly, so I'm very up to date with how Upe came. But I love hearing the story of like what effort you and your co-founders did by essentially during the pandemic supporting the locals by providing resources and literally being boots on the ground to support these people, and then decided that Upe needed to happen. Can you tell us about that sort of catalyst?
Sure. Yeah. So the pandemic happened, as we all know, and here in Costa Rica, they shut the borders down. They shut down the beaches. They shut down everything. And so most of our economy here is tourism based, and with no one here, you look around real quick, and your imagination, it doesn't take much with your imagination to be like, what's going to happen tomorrow, and how fast is this going to decline? And I wasn't the only person asking the question. Everybody was. And what we found too was a lot of people wanted answers to it, and they wanted to be part of the solution. And within a few weeks, we end up, I say we, my husband and I, who's also one of the founders, end up in a food operations running the logistics, because we knew the people were going to have to eat. We knew they couldn't go to the grocery store, so we were literally doing deliveries. We paired up with a nonprofit named Sepia. They do amazing work in the community, and we had, I don't know, 100+ volunteers that were coming, and they were doing these deliveries every week to these food baskets. So we had the operations of getting them together, and that was one of our other founders. He was in charge of that. And then we built a web app to track all the deliveries that had been made so that we knew which towns were in most needs. We were running surveys and feedback loops, and the volunteers were able to pick up very quickly how to work this web app. So it's basically like we were going car to car saying, this is how you do this, track this, get this information. And what really inspired us was, one, so many people showed up and they just wanted to be part of a solution. And knowing that you have that type of community, these people living here without even seeing them every day, just knowing that when there's a need and when there's a cause that unites us, they're there. And two, we were able to build something really elastic and simple on the fly that was effective, that helped our decision making. And so that was sort of the basis for U.pe. We started playing with the idea of a business directory. We went and got all this information around town. But what we found was the community that we wanted to build was between business owners. There wasn't much of a community because they were so busy doing their other stuff. This is, of course, post-pandemic. And so we kept experimenting with what was useful to people. And we kept coming back to people just want to know general information about what's going on. When there's an assembly in their town that might be, political, or who's hosting like a town fiestas, which is like a big event every year. So these things that normally go by the wayside, that they're shared in WhatsApp groups, or they're shared just in all these strange pockets of the internet. We're like, well, if we can arrange all this information like we did with these food deliveries, surely we can give people some easy technology to start sharing information that's important to them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, no,
And that's and so what we have been doing, because I want to rush full into blockchain. I want everyone to have wallets. I want everybody to have their own tokenized economies. We have these big dreams for 2046, as I like to call it. But it's like, but what can you do today? So once we realized that it would take a lot of effort to get like these businesses on board, we're like, well, we're just going to recreate something Web 2. It's really not that interesting, and we can make something more useful. What will people do? So we basically started dangling carrots and seeing how many people will reach out, with these carrots, these conversions. Will you give us your time to sign up for a forum? Will you create an account? Can we have your email address? And what we have found is it takes a whole hell of a lot of convincing for these first people to do anything, because it's a brand new behavior.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But I really liked the fact that you guys kind of are focused on meeting people where they're at. Like, I think that's something that's kind of missing when you have like a huge group of people. Like, I've been part of different groups and they're like, okay, cool, we're gonna onboard everyone, we're gonna give everyone a wallet, and like it's just chaos. Like, even like trying to like explain the first few steps to that. So yeah, it's really good to hear that you guys are kind of just meeting people where they're at and just providing them the solution for what they need in the moment, which is, I think that's really, really impactful. I'd love to know more about, like, aside from like boots on the ground efforts, like what other channels have you guys like employed to try to grow and scale the community? Have you guys mostly been doing word of mouth? Have you used any like online or digital channels? Like, how have you guys seen growth that way?
Well, it's a lot of it's word of mouth. We've been playing in traditional like Web 2 channels. We've been playing in Instagram a little bit. We kind of refuse to do Facebook. We know that there's an audience there, and so we'll be in Facebook groups a little bit as individual community members. And then we actually have other people who are doing organic Facebook for us. Like they're the community just picking it up and running with it. So we are getting traffic from there, but we're not putting any effort into Facebook other than a weekly, here's our community digest. Go check out this landing page. Instagram, we're doing very little. I've thrown a little money at posts, just to see what sort of analytics they give back. And
Mhm.
like attribution, everyone likes to show attribution. But when you blend the data with everyone else, you can see that it's not quite as impactful as they would like you to think that it is. But that's fine, because that's part of the experiment. That's pro tip for founders: if you treat everything as an experiment and it's allowed to fail, it makes your life a whole lot easier.
No, I think that makes sense. Like, I think the stress levels of like decision making, especially as a founder, is just let's just see how it goes. Let's look at the numbers. Like, let's just reel it back instead of like not everything has to stick and not everything is going to stick. So that definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's liberating. So we're getting ready to do Facebook within our own community network. This is actually fun. We're leveraging our own traffic within the network itself. So we have a couple of restaurants who are kind of left over who are using using our system as a menu, and so we get all their traffic,
Nice.
and they have QR codes in their businesses. We are working with property managers, hotels, getting in our community pages. So we have a lot of like hyper local IRL traffic, because that's really who we want to share this information with. And then Google SEO is sort of my bread and butter back in the day. So we've got lots of organic traffic just from coming up from what people want to search for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, like I said before, it really just sounds like you guys are like committed to meeting people where they're at and like being on the channels where your community is active. So I think that's just super important for like founders in general. Like you don't need to like try to manufacture like growth on a random channel just because you think the channel's cool. Everyone's
No.
on TikTok, everyone's on X. Like you need to meet your community where they're at. And I think that's just super, super impactful.
Yeah, actually, Steph's been helping us a lot with our growth strategy, right? And we're starting to post on new channels. And we had a discussion up front. I'm like, okay, don't feel like we have to get traction on all of this. Like, let's treat this like breadcrumbs. These are stories that we can point to. So there is value posting and doing things in other channels, even if you're not going to get that immediate traction and that immediate reward. It's always nice when you can go back a couple years prior and be like, you know what, we were doing this. Like, here's that timestamp of this LinkedIn post that seemed so arbitrary at the time, but it proves that we had this thought, or that we wanted to achieve this thing at this time. So if you treat your content and on these channels as like breadcrumbs, as opposed to I want to cast this wide net and achieve whatever KPIs, then again, it's a great perspective to shift why you're even posting there in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know, like, I think most marketers, that would be like music to their ears, like, hey, try out any channels. And don't worry, I'm not gonna like be on you about metrics, right? Like, I think that's the bane of all of our existence. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's hard to make sense of any of these metrics because of Goodhart's law. It's like, as soon as there's a test, and as soon as there's a metric to play to, someone's going to learn how to game it. So you tell someone you're
For
going to
sure.
get views, you bought it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a problem with all of these different channels, right? They want you to think that attribution wise, they're the source, they're the reason you got all these followers, you got everything from their channel, right? So yeah, it's kind of just being able to be like, okay, does this make sense? Is this realistic? And going from there. That's amazing though. I'd love to hear more about like the vision for the future of U.pe. Like you kind of like have dropped a little bit, but like I'd love to hear about where you kind of see U.pe in the next maybe 5 years, and like how you see U.pe serving the community, and if you are planning to expand to maybe any other communities around as well.
We're going to treat it like a wildflower, and we're going to see what blooms, and we're going to see who picks it up and maybe travels to other places with it. That's kind of the goal, is to see where it ends up, what the people want. But my dream is something flexible and elastic that each individual community can take, and we have basically the core components to it, where you have a place where the community can have a discussion about what's important, decide what they want to put up there, post what they want, and then have these channels like we have now, this local or those weekly community digest, these community pages that syndicate that information. So I have no idea what the future holds, but there's certain technology that I'm looking at where I'm like, man, it's really cool, especially in the Web3 ecosystem. Maybe not just the tech, but like I love HATS protocol so much. I can't wait to play with it. And I think Lens is really fascinating as well. I love social graphs. And we're in the market for like a good wallet connect with what we have now with our WordPress. So that's another thing that I'm manifesting in terms of what I would like to, where I'd like to see us go. What else? I think the nouns ecosystem is also really interesting. Steph and I talk about this a lot. I have a pipe dream of like a fork in the future, but I don't think I'm really allowed to think about it until we have more communities and more need for it. But I love noun style a lot.
And speaking of community, U.pe has created a big community based on like how many people are reading the weekly digest on the forum, aggregating more information into the community pages and so on. I think that like that's a part of the marketing funnel a lot of people neglect, is like, how do you nurture, how do you retain that community? So I'm curious, how is it that you are engaging, or beyond like social media and growth marketing and thinking about those tactics, like how are you thinking about making sure that those locals who are coming to U.pe for information are feeling heard or are getting their questions answered by maybe someone within the team or the community itself, or like how do you think about that?
So we have a couple different customer journeys, I guess, user journeys, not customers, because we don't really have them. But so we have people who just want information to find it. That's very basic. They don't need any sort of an account. We just want to be a click away. And so for that could be in a rental home. It could be in a restaurant. It could be in their Facebook feed, or we have a WhatsApp group too that we syndicate our digest from. So those are pretty easy, and they'll just go and they'll click through either our main platform or the forum whenever they want to consume information of what's important to them. So we deliver like a digest to them essentially, where they get an overview of the community. Then we also we want to foster a group of users who are sharing this type of information. And that's where we've been working. And that's probably one of the harder ones to get. And what you have to do is you have to figure out how to achieve like a critical mass. So what we did is we had a select group of people who were in the forum, who were playing with it. We were answering questions. We would invite more people to come in. And the next thing you know, now we have people going, how do I get in? What do I do? So we want to make sure that we satisfy them. And the reason they want to post is because they want to be seen in the digest and now these community pages. So when they post, we go celebrate them. Like, thanks for showing up to the party. So we all go in and we'll bookmark it, and we do make sure that we include their information within the next digest. Because if they took the time to post it, then we should share it. They see it, they get excited, and now we have this flywheel effect of, you share, we share. And so we're in that relationship right now. And then we have these community leaders that we've kind of been syndicating with, people who own some of these larger businesses in the area, and they say they want to help. So we have restaurants. We had a restaurant, one of the bigger ones in Tamarindo last week, said, we'll give you a corner of our menu and put a QR code on it, say community events or community info here. So they're another type of user and another type of person who is in our community who we want to get with, and they are a completely custom case that we are figuring out day by day. So how do we leverage our networks to create one big mega network for this community, for this town? And then the next will be, how do we take that network and we combine it with the network of the community that's 10 miles away? Like, how do you guys sync up?
I love this rabbit hole that like you've taken my mind down to because they're down through because I just started to like connect so many more dots, and I know we talk about this so regularly, but I just went down this like imagination like thought hole where it was like, okay, if you think about social graphing and you think about how people are contributing and working together, and I know you also mentioned earlier something along the lines of like we'll see kind of like who forks it or takes it to a new location. And then I was like, wow, how cool. And there's going to be like an interconnectedness of so much going on in the background just with like the blockchain tech happening. But then also the ability to just socialize with people like globally. It almost becomes like a new sort of decentralized social network. But that's just like a different tangent my mind just went down because
That's
of
true, right? Like, that's why I think Lens is so fascinating, because I'm like, it's like, before we fell down the Web3 rabbit hole, it was like these were dreams that we had no idea how to accomplish or achieve. And then
yeah.
I met Zaku from Coordinate, and he invited me to MetaCamp last year. He's like, you should come down for a day. And it blew my mind and heart wide open. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy. Like, you guys have been doing this for years. Like, thank you, like, so much. I can't wait to play with all of it. And, a year and a half later, we still haven't really been able to scratch the surface of it. But we know everything that's being built, and it's, everyone's all abuzz with all the new tech and everything that's going on. It's like, we actually don't really want to talk about it at all. We just kind of want to do it, and it needs to be under the hood. As we roll these things out and as we onboard more users with wallets, we're not doing DeFi. We're doing, NFTs with like local utility. Show your badge and you can come to this meetup. You get to like, there will be perks for that, and so that way you don't have to teach all of the big security stuff up front, which is so important. Like, it's incredibly important. But when you see what the user base is and what the next billion people look like it's just not really interesting to them.
Yeah. And from what I understand, U.pe is a public good. How does a public good tend to grow or self-sustain over time? Like, from what I understand, public goods are usually um, free and available to all the people. Something like U.pe, like how do you foresee the community keeping U.pe alive in the long run when its founders maybe want to let go a little bit, or do you even envision that?
Oh, I love the idea of not having ownership of things, because I like to sleep at night. And I like delegating. And I really truly believe that each of these communities, like, this technology needs to exist, or some iteration of what we're building needs to exist, because it doesn't yet. And it gives autonomy to these areas. In terms of it being a public good, the idea is to share community information, and that information is never going to deplete. It's always going to be available. The idea is not to put it behind paywalls. So while there may be some sort of evolution of like network goods or club goods that emerge from U.pe, we're always going to have that underlying mission and goal to provide community information. And that information's never going to be behind a paywall. It's going to be publicly available. I think another cool thing that we're doing actually is within these communities is each community is getting their own little marketing budget. I say little. We're starting to raise some funds among some of the bigger businesses here. And the idea is to take 20% of that and put it into a community marketing budget. So that way, in addition to the information there's a little bit of money to govern, right? So we can start playing with governance and roles without having to discuss any of the technology, right? Just how should we spend this money? What would you guys like to do with this? So like for Tamarindo, we've got a bunch of magnets going into rental homes. That's part of the community marketing budget, because the idea would be the collective goal or vision for the stewards of this is to increase awareness and views of the community information that's available, right? So in terms of it being a public, going back to it being a public good, we have to think of ways to make sure that like these people who actually are contributing financial capital to these individual communities aren't going to be able to capture the whole network as a resource. So that's when we talk, again, talking about public goods. It's like, all right, how do we actually empower the communities to figure that out? Like what kind of tools can we give to them?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to hear like maybe some tips or advice that you have for like new founders starting out, or even people who are looking to scale, or people who may be listening to this and thinking like, wow, I never thought of like, starting like founding something like a public good. Like, how do I go about doing that? Like, do you have any advice for anyone who maybe is just like early on in their journey?
It's impossible to do alone, I'm sure. What I do is I like to find people who are way more qualified than I am and see if they're just as crazy as I am to try to build something or to do something. But I would say that, not doing it by yourself, like have a buddy. Like it's always good to have someone to bounce these ideas off of. And it's fun to build collectively, I think, especially in the blockchain space, because that's the whole purpose of all of it. And then also like just be willing to experiment and be willing to fail, especially if it's your first time. Like no one ever hits a home run the first time. Like we all have failed projects. You know, and just don't get too attached to them. Like you can go build out there and you can build whatever you feel like you want, and that's well and good, but is it going to be picked up by everybody else is a bigger question. And so it's like, do you want to make something that you feel is right, or do you want to make something that's usable?
There you go. That's a word right there. Do you want to make something that's usable? Like, I think that's so important. And I think like the theme through all this has just been like community. Like it really just seems like you're just all in on building like the community of people at U.pe, and then people like, just the community at whole. So yeah, it's just really good to hear that like, like Steph said, PMF is something that like a lot of products in this industry don't have. So it's really awesome to hear that you're approaching it like from I guess the ground up. You're in the grassroots. You're not like, oh yeah, like I just had this really cool idea, I'm just going to force people to adopt it. Like you're looking at the community and saying, what does the community need? What do they actually want? And like how can we just be there to give them the tools? So yeah, that's really, really awesome. Really, really amazing hearing about what you're building.
Yeah, and if you try to anticipate everything, you're going to burn yourself out. And we've all been there. I'm sure if we've tried to build stuff before, it's like you start anticipating. It's one of the things I remember sitting around doing operations for the food during the pandemic. Was people were concerned. They're like, well, what if there's people gaming the system? What if people are taking more than one food basket and we're running out? And our leader was like, well, what's that number? Like, what are we talking about? 10% of people? And they're like, I don't know, like maybe like 7 or 8, So we're like, okay, so less than 2%. And it's like, move on. Like, are we going to use this much brain power to solve a problem that's so little? Like, if it's this big, sure. But learning how to allocate your attention, if that's your most valuable resource, sure, you can do it all, but what should you do?
Yeah, well said. Oh, so many gems. Thank you, Van. This has been awesome. Now, for anyone who wants to know more about what U.pe is up to, how can they stay in touch? Where should they visit? If someone wants to fork, how do they even get started?
Well, our main site's pretty easy to find. It's just U.pe. And from there, you can probably find us. We're on Twitter and Instagram is U.pe Local. Or you can just come down to Costa Rica and high five. That's cool too.
Also, I know that you have some alpha that has slightly been leaked on Twitter, but you have a goal of supporting some local partners in Costa Rica. You want to tell us a little bit about those bridges you're building?
The monkey business?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if the cat's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bag. You're in on this too. But okay, so Steph, you and I are fundraising for some monkey bridges with two NGOs down here, Salve Manos and the Clean Wave. They're two of my favorite organizations. They're teaming up, and we are working on getting bridges installed for monkeys. Which, why does a monkey need a bridge? I know, right? It's because their trees are being cut down and they're having trouble reaching each other and their food supply. So a temporary solution is to fundraise for these bridges to get them across roads, not going across power lines, and also at the same time raising money for trees to get locals to replant. Because we love our monkeys here. They're my favorite neighbors.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I have them right outside my kitchen window. And it's if all the trees get cut down, then I don't get to see that personally, which would make me sad, but also it's even more devastating that they're corralled in a smaller area. But again, there's so many wonderful people who are doing activism on behalf of monkeys, and as a Bored Ape holder, it's kind of my obligation to be the missing link between the monkeys and the people.
I love that. I'm going to give a little sneak peek to the presentation. Let's see if my computer will let me share. Yay. All right. So I will just share the roadmap to start. There it is. Van's been working really hard to make this beautiful and perfect for everyone. Van, do you want to talk about this a bit?
Yeah. Let me open up my screen a minute. Take a peek. So the Monkey Bridge, this particular one in Playa Grande, that's what we're fundraising for, is this one specific town. We had to request a monkey study from a university, and we started the process of that, I think, of like October of 2022. So it took us a little bit of fundraising, and finally in March of last year they showed up. So I think March through July they came in and they surveyed the town. And what they found is we have 6 troops of monkeys that need attention. So October, we threw a party down here in Playa Grande with the Clean Wave spearheading it, and they did the first batch of fundraising for the monkey bridges to kick it off, and also to let the locals know what was going on. So coming soon, we are going to unlock some monkey business NFTs, limited edition. Some of them are for bridges, and a few of them are to adopt a howler troop that you get to name. These people who are adopting the troops are invited to come down for a weekend in Costa Rica. That's our number 4 on the roadmap. And we've got 3 days of epic parties and cool region activities. After that, we're going to make sure those bridges get installed. We're working with Guava, which is the local power company here, and they will be in charge of installing them. We have had people specifically asking if they could come hang the bridges themselves, which I thought was awesome. And then once the rains start again in May, June, we're going to plant trees with any of the surplus funds that we have. And then also possibly cover any of these electrical boxes that they're using, that they're touching as they're crawling over electrical lines sometimes. And that should protect them from any sort of shocks.
I love this mission so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just like, I love like the clean wave, specifically, like the founder, one of them and I, like, we're good friends and we're cheerleaders down here. So we're always looking for ways to collaborate to do things. And when I brought him this, he was so excited. He's like, we have to do it. And it's been like, well, can we, like, in terms of like marketing, it's like, how do you get this? Like, what's in it for the buyer? And it's like, well, you can name the bridge. Well, you can name the troop. And anytime that they talk about the troop, it's your name. We'll put your PFP on the camera anytime we do any like promo shots with your camera.
Yeah.
Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this so much. It's like such a cool sort of like real world use case of bridging technology with like nature. And I think even going back to like the social network, social graph, like if you think about how nature works, right? Or like a mycelial network, underground, interconnected in ways that we can't even see. And so it's just amazing to see just the sort of mirroring that's happening in such a ground level. So like snaps to you, claps to you, hats off to you. I'm so excited to be a part of this journey with you and just to continue to keep learning and watching you just run with these ideas.
Well, it's fun, and we really hope that we do have success. And I do hope that there are other apes who are into it, because what I really want is a positive win and a use case for down here for me to be able to point to once we really get into DeFi territory where it's meaningful and impactful. And this will be the third breadcrumb that we've dropped. And the first one, Steph, you were part of too, was at MetaCamp this year, right? And we did a mini QF round with Gitcoin on optimism. And it was so cool that the staff got this big extra tip at the end that it meant a lot to them. Like, and so that was cool. So I can point to that anytime I go talk to people and I talk about crypto. I can point to the experience that we all collectively created that impacted this, the entire the staff of the hotel, which is cool. So I use that to evangelize crypto down here. And then Steph, you were also awesome and instrumental helping us get into the Giveth last QF round on optimism as well. And so we can use that, point to that, show all these other NGOs down here. It's like, hey, we did this. Here's what we did. These are the steps. We'll onboard you and let's put your project on there because there's just so much cool IRL impact.
Yeah.
Like with DeSci, especially, there's so many people doing citizen science that's collecting all this information, and it's like, share it all.
I love that.
Yeah, so the monkey bridges and monkey business is like number 3 to point to like positive use cases of how crypto is impacting our immediate area.
Yeah. I love to hear it. I love to see it, especially when you think about how under-reserved and underrepresented the regions can be, even by local governing bodies. They're technically almost inexistent. So you do rely on a lot of community to support one another because those are your allies.
And Costa Rica, by nature, the institutions are fairly decentralized, and there's a lot of community empowerment. So each community can actually petition to create an organization to govern their water. So there's water boards, there's like associations for like development. And we work with some of those organizations as well. And just to know that you can exist and it's not quite the government, but they're able to petition for funds and they're able to get stuff done at a community level is I don't know where else in the world it exists. I'm sure it probably does, but it's just neat to see that there's already traces of decentralization in these ways of life that have just been been ingrained in them. So it's like, cool. What can we do with this?
I love it. Van, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming on. It was a pleasure to have you. I don't have any more questions. Amira, do you have anything else you would like to ask?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say that it's been so awesome hearing about what you're building at U.pe. Like, honestly, like I love to hear like real world use cases, and like it's just mind blowing to see like what you guys have already done so far, and like super excited to hear about more coming down the pipeline.
Well, thank you guys, and I'm looking forward to see more what you guys do.
Thank
And all
you.
the projects that you support. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, there you have it, friends. Thank you all for joining us and coming on to watch our second episode of Planting Seeds. Hopefully, you've been able to reap some of the fruit of these tips, hacks, and just great information coming straight to you live from the Guava Gals. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.